Deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Hello there, good evening to you. It's 6 o'clock. I'm Michelle Dewberry and this is Dewbs & Co, the show where we'll try and get into everything that you are talking about tonight. Now, you might have heard that the world's #1 ranked men's tennis player, Novak Djokovic, currently finds himself basically in an Australian immigration detention centre. People are divided. There's those who demand that he's not made a special case of and thus granted an exemption. And then there's those that are angry about his treatment and demand that he should be allowed to play tennis. What side are you on? I'm talking, of course, about his vaccination status. And there are a couple of stories that we've heard a lot about recently: the social care crisis and the increased cost of living. The Tories thought that they'd finally come up with a solution to the former, to increase national insurance. But now there are calls to delay that to help with the latter. So should the planned rise in national insurance be delayed? And if so, isn't that just kicking the can down the road when it comes to social care? And the so-called Colston Four, the protesters who, in surprise to many, me included, were found not guilty of criminal damage after the toppling of the Bristol statue, of course, of Edward Colston. I wonder, though, has this verdict opened the floodgates to those who want to take history into their own hands? All of that to come and more, but first, the latest news headlines.
Hello, I'm Tamsin Roberts. Here are the top stories. The government sticking with plans to raise national insurance, with the Chancellor, Rishi Sunak, saying ducking difficult decisions would not be responsible. Commons leader Jacob Rees-Mogg wants the move to be scrapped, arguing the increase can't be justified as families struggle with surging food and energy costs. From April, national insurance is set to rise by 1.25% to help the NHS and social care. The Transport Secretary, Grant Shapps, says the decision was made collectively.
We think it's absolutely right that we do two things. One, clear up the very big backlog of operations and procedures that haven't been able to take place because the NHS has been so remarkably dealing with coronavirus. And two, make sure that we deal with the long-term problem of social care, and we're doing it through a rise in national insurance. That's the decision that we've made. We think we're making an important historic point here.
Boris Johnson has hit out at what he's calling mumbo-jumbo of anti-vaccination campaigns on social media. The Prime Minister made the comments at a vaccination centre in Northampton earlier, calling the online posts against the coronavirus jab nonsense. It comes as he denies suggestions the NHS doesn't have the staff to cope with pressures brought on by the Omicron variant. More than 17,000 people are currently in hospital with COVID, the most since February last year.
You've got people out there spouting complete nonsense about a vaccination. It's time that government, call them out on what they're doing. It is absolutely wrong, it's totally counterproductive, and the stuff they're putting out on social media is complete mumbo-jumbo.
US President Joe Biden has called Donald Trump a threat to democracy on the first anniversary of the Capitol Hill insurrection. 4 people died on the 6th of January last year, and 1 Capitol Police officer died the day after defending Congress. In an address to the nation earlier, the president said Donald Trump created a web of lies about the 2020 election.
The former president of the United States of America has created and spread a web of lies about the 2020 election. He's done so because he values power over principle, because he sees his own interest as more important than his country's interest, than America's interest, and because his bruised ego matters more to him than our democracy or our Constitution.
Well, Donald Trump has accused the president of using his name to try and further divide America. In a statement, he says this political theatre is a distraction for the fact Biden has completely failed. Former White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer told GBNews Trump isn't to blame for the violence, which he called despicable.
I was very taken back by the tone and tenor of the speech, by the attempt to blame everybody who didn't agree with what happened in the last election, and to frankly to push a very partisan policy agenda, that is to falsely claim to the American people that their right to vote is under attack, which it is not. And so they are now using this as an opportunity to push left-wing policies, which is equally deplorable.
The UK has condemned acts of violence in Kazakhstan following reports of soldiers firing at protesters in central Almaty. Russia has sent paratroopers to the country amid ongoing clashes, which has seen 18 members of Kazakhstan's security force killed. Police say dozens of rioters were killed yesterday. The Foreign Secretary Liz Truss says the UK will coordinate with its allies on what action should be taken.
We are concerned by the violent clashes in Kazakhstan, and we're following developments very closely. Our thoughts are with those who have lost their lives in what has happened, and we condemn the acts of violence and destruction of property.
Survivors and relatives of the British tourist killed during the Tunisia beach terror attack have agreed a settlement with travel operator TUI. 38 people, including 30 Britons, were killed at a hotel complex when a gunman stormed the beach. TUI agreed the undisclosed figure without admission of liability or fault. Well, those are the top stories. Now, let's get back to Dewbs & Co.
Thanks for that. Well, keeping me company until 7 o'clock. My panel, Mark Wallace, Chief Executive of Conservative Home, Morgan Schondelmeyer from Adam Smith Institute, and author Nick Tyrone. Good evening to you three. Your first time.
Indeed.
Congratulations. We'll go easy on you.
Please don't.
Well, we'll see. We'll see if you talk sense or not. That'll decide whether or not we go easy on you. Anyway, you know the score on Dewbs & Co as well. If you're regular to this show, it's not just about us and our thoughts, it's about you and yours. What's on your mind tonight? What do you think about the stories that we've got in line to discuss? You can get in touch with me on email. You can reach me at gbviews@gbnews.uk, or you can tweet me at Michelle Dewbs or at GBNews. And some of you, by the way, might be listening to us on the radio tonight. What a treat. That was a very exciting development at the start of this week. Not only are we on your screens and your devices, we're on your radio waves too. So good evening to you if you are listening. And let's start with a bit of another COVID story, shall we? I know, you'll be saying, why COVID again, Michelle, please? But I can't help it. I honestly do believe that the world is going mad. You will be aware, of course, that over in Australia, the world's #1 men's tennis player, Novak Djokovic, who travelled over to Melbourne to play in the Australian Open, is now basically in a form of immigration detention after his visa was revoked and his COVID vaccine exemption was questioned. A court is going to decide on whether he should be deported or not on Monday. And the situation has sparked fury, both among those who demand that he shouldn't be allowed to be a special case and play tennis, and the other side who are furious about his treatment. It's worth saying, by the way, that none of us actually really know his official vaccination status, and good, because quite frankly, it's none of our business. One of the most alarming things about this whole kind of situation for me now is how normalised it appears to be to demand to know someone's medical information and then the desperation to penalise the unvaccinated. Don't even get me started on the insistence that in order for Djokovic to even do his job, i.e. play tennis, he has to be vaccinated. And here in the UK, when we're talking about vaccinations, etc., it's been reported that booster jabs might be made a condition of entry for large venues and for quarantine-free international travel. I have to ask, restricting people's lives this way, let's face it, in order, in some cases, just for people to be able to do their jobs, it's all about trying to, in my mind, coerce them to be vaccinated. And if we agree that that's what it's all about, why is that acceptable? Nick?
Well, what I'll say is Australia has very strict COVID regulations. You can disagree with them or agree with them. And I just don't really see why Djokovic gets to skirt them. Particularly if we're just talking about sportsmen, when we think about the hoops that the England cricket team just had to go through, the regulations that they had to face, to the point that the Ashes was actually in question. And I probably would say that the Ashes are more important than the Australian Open because I'm a cricket fan. But nonetheless, I just do think, why does Djokovic get to have different rules for him than everybody else? That's my main question.
Well, I don't necessarily think that anyone should have one rule for them and one rule for another, but I would actually question the entirety of the rules. I think it's absolutely bonkers. I think the fact that we're in a situation, Morgan, actually, I'll bring you in, the fact that we're in a situation whereby this is a professional athlete, whether or not he can do his job, whether he can defend his title, is in the balance because of what I would call medical discrimination.
Yeah, well, I think I have to agree with Nick here. Whether or not you agree with Australia's policies, this is their entire approach to COVID, is having secure borders, being very strict with vaccinations, masks, quarantines. And Australia has denied their own citizens the right to travel to their country for compassionate grounds, to say goodbye to dying family members. The idea that because he's good at hitting a ball means that he's exempt is a bit ridiculous in my mind. Another thing is a condition of travel to a lot of countries is vaccinations. You need to be vaccinated against TB, Hep C, tetanus, to travel to a number of countries around this world. So this is not unprecedented that you need certain jabs to travel. This is just Australia's approach towards COVID. And I don't think that he should have been granted exceptions. I think you can also think it's a bit disgraceful the way he was treated, that his visa was revoked while he was in the air and he's now being held in a detention center. You can think both those things are true in my mind. But no, I don't think he should have been given special status.
Yeah, I almost see this, Mark Wallace, it's like, to me, it's become, as I said, and I say it repeatedly, I think the world is going mad. I think that people are going bonkers, and they're going so bonkers, inch by inch, that people are even losing sight of how bonkers they've become. And I sit there and I think this is almost akin with Djokovic. It's almost akin to a show trial. You know, he was okay enough to get on the plane and be allowed into the country. Now, all of a sudden, everyone, the world's media is on him, all of the kind of the leaders, the influential folk in Australia, they're coming out with their 10 pence worth. And I don't believe that there should be one rule for him and one rule for another. But I would push back against the rules generally. And by the way, we don't even know Djokovic's situation, and nor should we, in my mind.
Well, I think for the reasons Morgan just mentioned, there can be legitimate moments when somebody might, a public authority might want to ask something like this. For example, yellow fever vaccination passports, decades and decades old, quite routine and well known. I think one thing I'd hope we'd agree on is that a country has the right to control its own border policy. We've had a huge debate about that in the UK in recent years. One of the things you hear from Australian politicians at the moment is our country, our rules. And I think there is an element of that where Djokovic has got caught up, that media focus, as you say, he's got caught up in, firstly, the question of, in some cases, people going completely over the top in terms of their kind of relatively paranoiac response, enthusiasm for almost unlimited COVID rules. But he has also, I think, it seems to me, completely failed to avoid giving this impression that he wants, frankly, unfair treatment, the idea that he is really clever at hitting a ball back and forth and extremely wealthy. There has been a distinct impression that he's thumbing his nose at the public authorities, which hasn't helped him. He's also ended up in the middle of a political, kind of domestic political tension in Australia, which is that his exemption discussions, as I understand it, have happened with a state, and the federal government has said, actually, who crosses the border into Australia is our business, which means all of the things are pressed to a more strict rule against him. The idea that it's wrong for him to be in this kind of hotel or isolation centre, that seems entirely fair to me if he hasn't got the legal right to access. That's what anybody, you, me, him, anybody else would surely go through the same process.
So in a nutshell, I'm outvoted on this panel. I think that's a sense that I'm getting. But Nick Tyrone, let me ask you this. Do you think it's right? Because I think this whole fascination with what I'm going to call it for what it is, what I think it is anyway, it's a discrimination against the unvaccinated. And I feel like I need to stand up for it, actually, because I feel like inch by inch, I've talked about this for months now, there seems to be more and more people getting comfortable with the unvaccinated being discriminated against. We live in a society where you're not supposed to hate anyone, you're not supposed to discriminate anyone against anyone, but all of a sudden there's this collection of society that have become fair game. If you don't have your vaccine, you're allowed to be alienated.
Well, what I'd say is I take an old school conservative view on this, actually, which is that we've had this pandemic, and actually getting your COVID vaccination, as I have, I'm sure lots of people watching have, you know, partly for myself, but actually partly as a civil duty, partly as an idea of this is part of being part of, you know, being part of society. This is an important thing.
Taking this vaccination?
Taking this vaccination. And when you say that it's...
How many times over?
Well, but hold on. But that's another separate point. But just taking the two that have been asked of you, if you like, and then I suppose the booster, which is the third. You know, this idea that it's a separate group that you can compare to being persecuted. You know, being persecuted for the color of your skin or your religion. Well, certainly the color of your skin, that's completely immutable. There's nothing you can do about that. That's just, you know, you're being discriminated against something that you can do nothing about. Your religion, you're asking, you know, I suppose one can say it's slightly different, but not that much different, because it's actually something that's just basically in your culture. All we're asking is that everyone do their duty and get to vaccines.
I think we might have found the point at which we diverge. So
okay.
I think it's really, really important that I would encourage anyone watching to get vaccinated and get boosted. As you say, I've done the same thing, but I think it's extremely important that is a choice. And I think I think where Michelle and I would probably differ is that I think this country is broadly striking the right approach, I think. The fact is that when you're talking about people providing evidence of vaccination to access a major event, as I understand it, the system is a negative test, which means that actually your right to not get vaccinated is completely protected by that. There's no requirement to get vaccinated. And I don't think that is discriminatory. If actually you can be vaccinated or unvaccinated and you can come in, the only restriction is please don't have COVID and cough it in somebody else's face.
Morgan, what's your view?
I think Mark hit the point there, just at the end, that there is no compulsion to get vaccinated in this country. You may be feeling societal pressures, you may be feeling inconvenience if you're not vaccinated, but there are very clear and easy workarounds. You can still access restaurants. I mean,
do you think there's coercion then? If we don't want to use the word compulsion, do you think there's coercion?
Not in any real sense. No.
You don't think people in this country feel coerced into getting the vaccine multiple times over?
No, I think that there's clear public health messaging to encourage people to get it. I think there are, as we say, some access requirements. But again, being able to provide a negative test is a very simple thing to do. In New York, you need to show your vaccination status to get into any restaurant. It's the same in...
Do you agree with that?
No, I don't, because I believe that is coercion. I believe shutting off easy access to everyday activities, if you're not vaccinated, is coercion. If you are allowed to provide a negative test, that's just an alternative route, and that's your choice, whether or not you want to take a test every time you have to go somewhere, or you get vaccinated and say, I've done my part, I'm vaccinated now, let me live my life.
Right.
You can choose those two maybe inconvenient options.
Well, there you go. You've heard what my panel think. I wonder what you think. I think I'm on my own on this panel tonight. Are you with me, or are you more on the side of the panel? I personally do think there's huge coercion at the moment for people not just to be vaccinated, but to be treble vaccinated, and I worry and suspect it will continue beyond the 3. Get in touch though and let me know your thoughts. Am I wrong? Lots of you getting in touch already. Stu from Bristol has been in touch, certainly thinks I'm wrong. He says, oh, good Lord, not again. Little Miss COVID denier is at it again. Stu, I don't deny COVID. That would make me bizarre. Not only have I had COVID, I have long COVID. I don't deny it exists. That is not true. What I am against, and I am wholeheartedly against, is the direction of travel that I feel many parts of the world are going in, which is coercion and compulsory vaccines. I mean, anyone that follows me on Twitter would have known that last night I was complaining about Italy, for example, where they're making it mandatory for over 50s to be vaccinated. And then you can come back at me and say, well, why do I care about Italy, Michelle? Well, because, you know, you only have to look at the direction of travel that the UK goes in. We do look to other countries for their responses to things when we often take our lead from what our neighbours are doing. So that's why it concerns me. Someone else has been in contact saying we need to start calling Novak Djokovic Novak's Djokovic. I have to say, you did make me chuckle with that. That was Henry who said it there. John is saying, hang on a second, Annie is in touch about Djokovic, saying, my friend lives in Melbourne, has been locked down for most of her time now since March 2020. She hasn't even been able to fly home to see her mum, who subsequently died. Basically, the point there is one rule for one rule for all. Do let me know your thoughts. Keep them coming in. gbviews@gbnews.uk. Going to take a quick break now. When we come back, we'll be talking about quite a few things, actually. We'll be talking about the so-called Colston 4, that whole statue toppling in Bristol, and, of course, national insurance. Should we delay the rise that was planned to try and support the NHS backlogs and social care? So we'll have that and more coming up. Don't go away.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Good evening. It's another cold one out there tonight. Not quite as frosty as last night, but still the potential for things to be problematic in the morning. Some heavy snow showers in places and likely to be quite icy as well. We've seen this set of weather fronts crossing the country, bringing rain and some hill snow. Behind it, the isobars pinching together, so a blustery night, and particularly across Western Scotland, Northern Ireland, showers coming in here, Northwest England too. A mixture with those showers with hail, sleet, but also some snow, mostly over hills, but even at low levels, you may wake up to a centimetre or two. So we do have a yellow warning in place. Further south and east, most places dry and clear and cold, but not quite as cold as last night. It could be quite icy then first thing in the morning, with further snow showers coming into Northern Ireland, Western Scotland and Northwest England. A few wintry showers elsewhere, and then we're looking at a zone of cloudier and wetter weather coming into South Wales and Southwest England around the middle of the day. That'll be mostly rain, but again, some snow is possible over the hills. Much of the east dry and bright during the course of tomorrow, but feeling cold, especially with a fairly brisk breeze. Still quite a few showers across the south for a time during Friday evening, but then turning largely dry, clear and cold with a more extensive frost before. Out west, more cloud and rain comes marching in for the weekend. That will again bring some snow over the hills of northern England for a time on Saturday morning, and across parts of Scotland too, but turning back to rain as we see milder air moving in with this weather system, bringing a fairly soggy Saturday. Western parts turning drier and brighter in the afternoon, but even then there will be showers coming along. Turning a bit milder on Saturday, but obviously not feeling all that pleasant with the breeze and the rain. That scoots away, and Sunday compared to Saturday looking much drier and much brighter, with the winds a touch lighter as well. Goodbye.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Hello there, welcome back to Dewbs and Co. We're having our own little mini debate here at the moment about accents in the break. I'll tell you for why. Simon has emailed Simon online, he says, saying the thing that really irritates me, Michelle, is the bad diction of news presenters who repeatedly mispronounce their vowels. I passionately believe, he goes on to say, that all presenters should have to attend compulsory diction lessons. Simon, get a life. There are accents in the UK and there are different accents, and heaven forbid, even Northerners are allowed on the telly these days. Would you believe it? Anyway, that's what's got us talking in the break, and your emails on the subjects that we were discussing before the break have been flying in. Split opinions, I have to say. Lots of you agreeing with the panel, and some of you, I need more. Some of you are agreeing with me. Keep your thoughts coming in. gbviews@gbnews.uk, or you can tweet me at Michelle Dewbs or at GB News. Let's move on though. Jacob Rees-Mogg. Now, you know, this conversation, and it goes on and on and on and on. What are we going to do about social care? You'll remember there's been commissions and reports that go back decades. I think the Dilnot report was about, well, I think it was over a decade ago now. Nothing really ever changed, did it? But the Tories, I think that they came up with a solution, I think back in September. Let's raise national insurance. That'll do it. That was apparently the answer anyway. But Jacob Rees-Mogg now, the leader of the House of Commons, is believed to have called on Boris Johnson to abandon those plans. He's saying that the rise should be scrapped in light of the rising living costs. But Rishi Sunak, the Chancellor, was said to have refused to change course at a cabinet meeting yesterday, saying it would mean having to find the money to tackle the NHS backlog and social care reforms elsewhere. Mark Wallace, what's your thoughts on this?
Well, first, I entirely sympathise with Jacob Rees-Mogg's position. The fact is that no Conservative should want to raise tax, particularly no Conservative after what we've all just been through and looking at the generational inequalities in our society, should specifically be raising a tax that is that applies to younger workers disproportionately. And the other element I'd highlight at this point, GB News viewers in particular, to take note, please. National insurance itself is a complete con. National insurance doesn't. People talk about, I've paid into the pot. They talk about a national insurance scheme, insurance contributions, with the impression that this all pays towards your own retirement benefits or your own benefits if you fall ill and can't work. It simply isn't true. It hasn't been true for many, many years. National insurance is just income tax under another brand. And that's something that governments of all parties, but particularly the treasuries of all parties, have maintained as a separate category because they find it easier to raise for that very reason. And so the first thing we should do is we should be honest about this. It's just income tax part 2. This time it's even more expensive. We should roll the two really into one income tax. And
don't forget as well, you have employers NI and you have employees NI as well.
Quite exactly, and even more explicit jobs tax as well as a work tax. And you know, frankly, if this was an honest tax system, simply income tax, would it be as easy for any given government to raise it in this particular way? I don't think it would be. And it's particularly interesting to hear the Chancellor, for whom I have a lot of respect, talking about how important it is, kind of slapping Jacob Rees-Mogg down a bit by saying it's important that we take difficult decisions, not easy decisions. Well, raising national insurance, which exempts people who are gaining their income from pension income, for example, from this rise, doesn't seem to me like the hard decision. It seems like an easier decision. It's a bit of a dodge, surely. The fact we're expecting younger workers who already earn less, haven't benefited from free university, are going to have to deal with the cost of the national debt, which their parents and grandparents largely ran up, can't afford houses, have much less opportunity in terms of social mobility than their parents' generation, expecting them to pay the tab for this through basically a covert income tax rise doesn't seem fair to me.
Well, there you go. That was Mark Wallace. I want your thoughts as well. I've got a poll running on my Twitter, on the GB News Twitter feed at the moment, asking you, do you think that the national insurance rise should be delayed to help people with the cost of living? It won't surprise you to know that most people on that poll currently say yes, but I'll have the results of that poll towards the end of the show. But Nick Tyrone, your thoughts?
My thoughts is I mainly agree with Mark in the sense that
Stop agreeing, you lot.
I know, but I will diverge. I will diverge because I think that the one point that I will make beyond what Mark said is I think this is a real opportunity for Labour and Starmer, because actually the idea that you have the Tories raising tax is one thing, and actually a fairly unprogressive tax, as you alluded to, Mark. It's something that hits. If the idea is to pay for social care, the idea that we're hitting young workers is difficult. And I think that Starmer could exploit this. This is a thing, not just on the basis of the tax itself, but the fact that if you're going to be faced the next election with two parties, the whole idea with the Tories often like to run a kind of there's going to be a tax bomb if you elect Labour, your taxes will go up, and people go, oh, the fact that the Tories have already done it sort of softens that blow and makes that attack much more blunted and makes it much more difficult for the Tories to run that against Labour, which I think is actually quite a major thing.
Do you think Labour have the gumption to kind of go against their grain and oppose this? Or are they just too into high taxes to...
It's a good question, and actually at one point I would have thought, no, I don't know if they do, but actually it just seems like for whatever reason Starmer's operations kind of... It's just got better. I don't know what that is. Possibly, actually, if I was going to point to something, it's probably the shadow. He just has a much better shadow cabinet now, who will be telling him. He'll have people like Cooper around the table going, "You have to attack this. You have to do this." So I think it's actually a major thing for the Tories. I think this is I think it's a bigger problem for the Tories than I think they are admitting at the moment.
Morgan?
I think it's a bad tax increase for all the reasons that we've said. So I'd like to also point out what it's trying to solve. It's trying to solve the NHS backlog and social care. And I think the hard choice that Rishi Sunak was alluding to would actually be root and branch reforms of these institutions. So focusing on why the NHS does not provide service the way that it could, ways which we can make it more cost effective but still providing free care. All of these things, reforming how we access social care, increasing provision of private life insurance, and all of these things which could take the burden off of the taxpayer and not need these really harmful tax rises. I think we are burdened with a ton of COVID debt, which we're going to have to deal with as well. But again, I don't think putting taxes on working people in a time when they're already under incredible amounts of stress is the best way to go about it. We could focus on cutting spending in certain areas, less distortion, taxes that are less distortionary as a better option to raise. There are a lot of things that you could do besides national insurance, which, as we say, is a tax on working people and employers at the same time.
So I'm going to come back to you, Mark, because you started this conversation saying about how we shouldn't be doing this with national insurance. Well, how are we going to fund? Because this is the million-dollar question. And it seems to be incredibly difficult to solve. Otherwise, I can only assume it would have been solved many years before. Is how do we then fund social care?
Well, it's a multi-billion dollar question, really, or tens of billions dollar question. Of course, immediately, this tax rise isn't being used to fund social care.
No,
it's going to the NHS budget, and we're told that in time it'll be moved over. I think that difficult conversation that Rishi Sunak mentioned earlier, that difficult decision, part of the difficult decision is we're all going to have to, at some point in this country, be honest with people that it's really important that you should have the opportunity to buy a house. It's really important that you should have the opportunity to save for the future. And in my view, it's absolutely sacrosanct that you should have the opportunity, in my view, tax-free, when your life comes to an end, to pass on what you have left to your children. However, the idea that actually buying the house, putting together the savings, getting the pension, that there should be nothing in between doing that and passing it all on, you should actually have to pay some of the cost of your own social care. Like the reason we want people to save and do the responsible thing of saving for their retirement, saving against the rainy day of illness and old age, is in order for them and wider society to not end up in a total crisis when all the benefits of medical technology and living longer come along in terms of needing social care. At the minute, we're trying to have our cake and eat it, I fear, as a society, where we rightly value home ownership and we rightly value inheritance, but we're trying to tell people you can do both those things, but actually you shouldn't have to bear any of the, or much of the downside costs of actually retiring. And unfortunately, as life goes on, people should have to contribute to their own social care. As Conservatives, we should believe in freedom, but also responsibility. And that surely is part of it. I think I understand why elected politicians facing the electorate are scared of doing that, because look what happened to Theresa May. This is obviously controversial, obviously not easy to hear. But I do believe very strongly that Conservatives have a responsibility to do what Rishi Sunak said they have a responsibility to do, to deliver difficult truths about hard decisions, to do the right thing, and actually the right thing for the next generation as well.
Yeah, Nick Tyrone, I mean, Mark Wallace, I'm using your names because many of you, as I said, are listening to us as opposed to watching us. So I'm just trying to distinguish the different voices. But Nick Tyrone, you know, we're hearing there about, well, people should be able to buy a house and pass it on. Many of my viewers will be watching this going, are you guys, like, deluded? They would love to be able to buy a house, let alone have something to pass on, and let alone have money to be able to save for their elder years. And it's just not affordable to them in any way at the moment.
Well, then I would then ask them, do you not think it should be at least somewhat the responsibility of more wealthy homeowners or more wealthy pensioners to fund this to some extent, rather than 21-year-olds who might be burdened with any number of
So what
other
would you
problems?
do then? How would you fund this then if it's not through working age NI?
We need something that will encourage people, I think, to downsize. I think that's the biggest thing. I don't know what exactly that is, but I think that's the way you probably have to look at it. How do we get older people to sell their homes? Because that will have have the benefit of having more homes on the market, and that will be better for people. But also, how do we trigger that? That's the question.
So
and I don't have the answer to that. But
you think a person should be responsible for funding their social care by downsizing their own home, taking the equity, presumably, and spending all that equity?
At least to some extent. I don't mean wholly. I'm not talking about some libertarian...
What about the person then, Morgan? If we take... let me bring you in as well, Morgan. If we bring you in and ask you... We're talking here about home ownership, we're talking about inheritance, we're talking about downsizing. That's great for everyone that's got these assets, but how is that fair when the person in the same care home in the next room has never worked a day in their life, has spent their whole life on benefits and essentially gets the same care for free? Where's the fairness in that?
Well, I think that that's a tricky question. You wouldn't want to frame it in a way of not providing care to people who are the lower ends of the income spectrum, but by providing people who can afford it a credible alternative to a state-funded care system. So one of the things that we looked at the ASI is how to increase private take-up of life insurance. There's not an incredibly good market for private life insurance in this country, and there's a few reasons why. One of the reasons is in social care, you have a very small proportion of people who will need care for a very long period of time. Those are people who are permanently disabled, who get into accidents, are born with certain birth defects, etc. So they're in care for a vast majority of their life. The majority of people are only in care for a couple of years, which is a manageable cost. So the reason why private health insurance isn't really a thing is because they can't take on the burden of that long tail risk where someone will need care for 30 years or so. So what we've proposed is that the government will step in and be the insurer of last resort for people who need care for an extended period of time. But if you need care for 5 years at the end of your life, maybe you have someone come to your house to help you with your day-to-day activities, et cetera, or you're in a home, that is something that you would cover with private insurance for people that can afford it.
There you go. We might have solved the social care crisis just on this panel in 5 minutes. We might have achieved what many politicians have failed in years. What do you think? What do you think to the suggestions of the panel? And what are your suggestions? Lots of you emailing in, by the way. The poll that I've got running on GB News' Twitter account is absolutely saying in a huge majority, I think it's about 85% or something at the moment, that the national insurance rise should be delayed. Everyone's emailing in pretty much saying the same thing, that it should be delayed. And that's all well and good. But I guess the point that then raises is, so how do you then fund the social care? Because you can bet your bottom dollar, by the way, if you delay it now temporarily to try and soften the blow of the rise, the increase in living costs, at what point do you then say, right, okay, it's all good then, you can put it back up? Because when you take temporary benefits from people, if you want to see it as a benefit, you know, it was supposed to be risen and now it's not. When you then start changing that, people don't like it. So I imagine that if you didn't raise it now, you might have missed your opportunity. And if you miss your opportunity, how then are you going to fund that social care? Let me know your thoughts, GBviews at gbnews.uk, or tweet me at Michelle Dewbs or at GBnews. Going to take a quick break. When we come back, I'll be looking at, remember the Colston 4? They was obviously yesterday declared not guilty of criminal damage after the Edward Colston statue in Bristol was pulled down. I wonder though, what did that verdict mean? Do you think it might have set a precedent now for future attempts for other people to basically want to pull down statues that they don't like? We'll be discussing that and more after the break.
Coming up on Dan Wootton tonight, does the left really want our awful new normal to last forever? The Spectator's Douglas Murray asks why Liberals are obsessed with bonkers COVID rules. US broadcasting superstar Megyn Kelly returns to give her expert take on the biggest international headlines. Are social media giants like Twitter about to pay the price for letting cancel culture run amok? Former Trump advisor turned tech pioneer Jason Miller joins me to discuss his new free speech-friendly platform. Plus, I'll break down the day's biggest stories with my superstar panel, Loose Women star and broadcaster Carol McGiffin, conservative commentator Dominique Samuels, and the author and journalist Amy Nicol. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Hello there, welcome back. We're still debating the whole social care here during the break, and Stella has been in touch on the email saying, what I would like to see, Michelle, are incentives for people to care for their own elderly relatives. Instead, we've encouraged an economy where everyone is in paid employment, leaving no time for these family duties. She goes on to suggest, why don't we have a national care service, basically? So young people who serve for, say, 3 years in care will then go on to get free university. I see what you're suggesting there, Stella. And I also think you raise an interesting point there about how we do care for the needy family members that we might have, whether that's elderly or not. In this country, you know, people tend to go into homes, don't they? And I know if you look at various different places over the world, people tend to move their relatives in with them. Would that be for you? Would you like your elderly parents or relatives to move back into the family home and you care for them? What do you think to Stella's suggestion? Get in touch and let me know. But let's move on to a different topic for now. You will have noticed it's been all over the media today, hasn't it? That the four people yesterday who were accused of illegally removing a statue of Edward Colston in Bristol were yesterday found not guilty of criminal damage. The statue had been removed as part of a Black Lives Matter protest in the city last June. The defence argument in court had been that Edward Colston's statue memorialised a man who prospered from the slave trade. The prosecution's argument, though, was that the case should be about the rule of law and not politics. And I have to say, I wholeheartedly agree with that. And while supporters of the accused applauded and cheered when the verdict was given, some critics said afterwards that it probably may set a precedent for further vandalism and dangerous identity politics. Quite a lot of division on this one, I have to say, Morgan, but I wonder where you stand.
I take a very boring centrist view, I suppose, that you can agree that the statue was offensive to people of color, that there shouldn't be a statue to someone who was so intimately involved in the slave trade, but also think that if it's going to come down, it should come down through formal mechanisms and not being torn down in a protest. I guess I wouldn't think that would be controversial. You can think that the statue is bad. I think a lot of statues to Confederate generals in the U.S. are bad, but I'm also not going to advocate that they be torn down. I think we live in a democratic society. We have formal means through which you can express your dissent with something that goes on in your city, and I do think that this would set a dangerous precedent, that people will take these matters into their own hands, because in this case there were no repercussions.
Yeah, Nick, I wonder your thoughts, because my view, I don't want to live in a society where if you don't like something, basically you can just do what you want with it, as long as you can kind of in your own head or whatever justify that. I don't want to live in that society. I think that if something needs to be removed, it should be removed by the proper channels. However, those people on the other side of the argument to me will say, well, if those proper channels fail and something that is offensive to many does remain, then people should be able to take things into their own hands.
Well, so I broadly agree with Morgan on that point, but where I'll be a bit spicy is my big concern is the government coming out today and in response to this saying, I think it was Grant Shapps. Yeah. And saying, well, don't worry, the policing bill will take care of this. And there's two things to say about that. One of which is I don't really see how that's actually true. I mean, I've actually been through the policing bill quite extensively, and I don't really see what he means. I don't understand. It feels like a bit of just a thing to say. And secondly, I would just warn people, particularly GBNews viewers, about the policing bill. Like, for instance, it's very prohibitive on any protests. So, for instance, let's say there's another lockdown, you want to protest that lockdown. Actually, some of the penalties that are coming in from the policing bill are quite steep, and I worry that one of the things that...
Some of the maximum penalties.
But I mean, they could, and they certainly could apply, certainly to lockdown protests. I could definitely see that happening. And I think that, that's just something to keep in mind. And I feel like what they're doing is sort of saying, well, look at the Colston statue issue, kind of divert your attention over here, which is taking away from, I think, lots of people on the right who have lots of issues that they might want to protest and saying, well, don't worry about it. And I think they should.
If I could go back in on that, the policing bill, I think you raise a really good point. And what we see with this government, and unfortunately too many governments, is they see a problem that they want to take up as their mantelpiece, and then they legislate accordingly. There are already criminal offenses that if you damage property. Those things already exist. Maybe you don't think that the maximum sentence is high enough, fair. But you shouldn't be regulating to say that if you remove a statue, that's a special class of criminal damage. I think that's a step too far. Because why is a statue a special category to something else that costs the same amount of money? If you're damaging property that is not yours, the content of the property should be relevant. It should be about the value, which is typically how we judge the severity of criminal damage. I don't think that we should create this kind of protected class of inanimate object.
But some things, Mark Wallace, they do mean more to people than other things. So, for example, I don't know, I'm going to be silly in my examples, I'm sure, but damaging, I don't know, a wall versus damaging a statue or a place of religion or something, I would imagine that there are different kind of classes or types of places and they might warrant different sentences.
Well, this is something that, of course, as you say, is a sentencing question to a certain extent about a judge is in a position, having reviewed the evidence of the trial and heard claims for mitigation and or severity of punishment, to then conclude that there are exacerbating factors. The core question of this case in Bristol is about the jury's verdict about guilt or otherwise. I think, firstly, it's important to note that it's absolutely right that in this country we maintain and protect our jury system. We've seen various assaults on it from various parts of Home Office legislation from different parties in the last couple of decades on that. So, the jury were there and they made their own decision. I think there are very serious potential future consequences of setting, if a precedent was to be set on questions like about taking the law into your own hands. You mentioned earlier the idea that, some people would say that if those channels, those formal, peaceful, non-violent channels to, say, take down or move a statue had failed, well, those channels haven't failed. In a democracy, if you want something to happen and you campaign for it to happen and you don't get your way, democracy hasn't failed. The democratic system in Bristol hasn't failed. What's happened is your campaign has failed. You haven't got your way because you haven't persuaded enough of your fellow citizens to vote in the same way that you would like. You've still got the opportunity to keep on trying, but there isn't and there shouldn't be some kind of pressure cooker system where you can gather together a few hundred people and just go and do it without asking. What I found troubling, I think what quite a lot of viewers will find surprising in this case, is this isn't what's called a perverse verdict, where a jury decides to say, well, actually, leave the law aside, we think this is what's right. Actually, the defence made the case that in British law at the moment, in English law at the moment, if you reasonably believe that the owner of the property would be okay with you doing this, then you can do it. That seems to me to be something that actually the government should act on to change the law for future offences, because it goes against everything else that we normally say about consent. You can't, consent to commit violence against a person or their property shouldn't rest on, I had a kind of genuine belief that they would be okay with it. That isn't how consent works. And in this case, that is a question of someone putting their own opinion and preference over somebody's actual rights about something they own. If you look at, there's an excellent statue of Gandhi across Parliament Square, or on the opposite side of Parliament Square from the Palace of Westminster. He's a great man, he's rightly memorialised there. But he also said some incredibly racist things about black South Africans. If somebody decides that, in their view, those things were so bad that it deserves to be taken down, and they genuinely believe that the owners of that statue would be okay with it, whether they're right or wrong, I don't think in future they should have the right to just take take that action in their own hands.
I think basically you're saying let's rely on legislative and jurisprudence.
I'm making the 2022 crazy argument, which is that maybe having a mob just do whatever they want was a bad thing.
It's a bad thing. I think I would agree with you.
Well, Andrew has emailed in saying this whole thing is ridiculous nonsense of pulling down statues and things like renaming roads. It's cancel culture, and it's that needs to be cancelled. There you go. Well, it's almost time for the end of the show, but there's something else on my mind before we go, because, we've just had a busy festive period, haven't we? Did anyone out there drink maybe one or two too many? I know that I did, and you wake up the next day, especially in my case, if you've got a kid to look after and you sit there and you go, never again. And then, of course, we all do it all over again. Well, I wonder how many of you are doing dry January this year, because according to research, 3 in 10 people give up booze. So they'll sit there, they'll have all of this kind of grand ambitions, never going to drink ever again. They start dry January, but by now pretty much, or thereabouts, many of them have already given up on the dry January. 3 in 10, in fact, have given up on dry January by the second week, and 21% doing it don't last the whole month. Either of you guys are in dry January, Mark?
I'm doing January.
January?
Yeah, I'm just drinking more gin.
I know, I was just about to say, I think I can guess what that means. Nick Taran, dry January for you?
God, no. I mean, how do you get through January in Britain without booze? I mean, it's really, really difficult. That's my personal view.
Morgan?
Nope, never considered it.
No?
No, I feel like it's just not a good way to go about a lifestyle change. If you want to do something, just abandoning it for 1 month, just because that's the month that people have decided they want to stop drinking, it just seems a bit strange to me.
I think it's a very peculiar, if you are indeed going to give up alcohol, and good luck to you, by the way. For many people, it's incredibly difficult giving up alcohol. But January, of all the months to try, I think January must be very difficult indeed. So if you are doing dry January, try and get your willpower out there. Try and make it past the second week in January. I'm laughing because my New Year's resolution was to stop eating chocolate in bed. I eat chocolate in bed before I get up every day of my life. I have done for about, 20 odd years. And my New Year's resolution, January resolution, was to not do it. I lasted, I think, until about the 2nd of January, and I've done it every day. I've probably eaten a lot more, actually, since the start of January, since I gave it up in my own head anyway. And I went vegetarian as well in January, and I've completely forgotten. And I've eaten pork pies, and I had a chicken and bacon salad yesterday as well. So there you go. I was not doing too well on that resolution either. Right, I'm just going to get you the poll results before I leave. I was asking you whether or not you think that the national insurance delay, the rise should be delayed. I'm hoping that someone is magically going to tell me the poll result in my ear. I'm dropping enough hints. 84%, there you go, 84% of you have said that yes, the planned national insurance rise should be delayed. 16% of you said no. So there you go. Anyway, that's all from us tonight. I'll be back the same time tomorrow. Thank you very much for your company. Thank you as well to your panel for your contribution. Have a good evening, and I'll see you tomorrow at 6 o'clock.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Good evening. It's another cold one out there tonight. Not quite as frosty as last night, but still the potential for things to be problematic in the morning. Some heavy snow showers in places and likely to be quite icy as well. We've seen this set of weather fronts crossing the country, bringing rain and some hill snow. Behind it, the isobars pinching together, so a blustery night, and particularly across Western Scotland, Northern Ireland, showers coming in here, Northwest England too. A mixture with those showers with hail, sleet, but also some snow, mostly over hills, but even at low levels, you may wake up to a centimetre or two. So we do have a yellow warning in place. Further south and east, most places dry and clear and cold, but not quite as cold as last night. Could be quite icy then first thing in the morning, with further snow showers coming into Northern Ireland, Western Scotland and Northwest England. A few wintry showers elsewhere, and then we're looking at a zone of cloudier and wetter weather coming into South Wales and Southwest England around the middle of the day. That'll be mostly rain, but again, some snow is possible over the hills. Much of the east dry and bright during the course of tomorrow, but feeling cold, especially with a fairly brisk breeze. Still quite a few showers across the south for a time during Friday evening, but then turning largely dry, clear and cold with a more extensive frost before. Out west, more cloud and rain comes marching in for the weekend. That will again bring some snow over the hills of northern England for a time on Saturday morning and across parts of Scotland too. But turning back to rain as we see milder air moving in with this weather system, bringing a fairly soggy Saturday. Western parts turning drier and brighter in the afternoon, but even then there will be showers coming along. Turning a bit milder on Saturday, but obviously not feeling all that pleasant with the breeze and the rain. That scoots away, and Sunday compared to Saturday looking much drier and much brighter with the winds a touch lighter as well. Goodbye.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview Channel 236.
On Sky, we're Channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you